A few days ago, some new RE4 Remake leaks surfaced, and they're pretty shocking to say the least. In this video, I will be breaking down these said leaks and giving my personal thoughts about them. So with that being said, let's get right into it. The leaker starts off by saying that the minigun enemy on the island has been completely removed in the remake. So I personally don't see this as that big of a deal considering we only encountered just a couple of these enemies in the game. However, I feel like if Capcom does plan on cutting anything in the remake, then it should be replaced with something much bigger. The leaker then states that there will be 3 different playable scenarios, one for Leon, one for Ada, and one for Luis. I feel like this is much needed, especially for Luis, as I think most of us can agree that he just didn't get the screen time that he deserved and died way too soon in the original. The next leak states that the game will include the guard mechanic from Resident Evil Village, and will feature the dodge mechanic from the RE3 Remake. So this definitely makes a lot of sense, especially since these mechanics worked very well in the games they were in, and were pretty well received by fans. It then states that the Vertigo, Dr. Salvador, and Chief Mendez will all be stalkers in the RE4 Remake. Each of them will have their own unique mechanics. The Vertigo will have the ability to turn invisible, making it much more difficult to spot him. Dr. Salvador will mutate further and further the more you damage him, and his mask will slowly deteriorate over time. Chief Mendez will call upon villagers to hunt you down. Additionally, Mendez will have AI very similar to Mr. X from the Resident Evil 2 remake. Dr. Salvador will have his own boss fight during the island segment of the game when he is fully mutated. Leon will go head to head against Dr. Salvador with a chainsaw of his own. So I know a lot of people are kind of getting sick of the Stalker roles, but this actually sounds pretty good to me. The reason the Stalker enemies got old so fast is because Capcom just recycled the same mechanics over and over for each Stalker. But with these interesting new mechanics from the Stalkers in the RE4 Remake, I feel like it will really help these Stalkers stand out and give the game a much more fresh experience. Moving on, the leaker states that you will start the game off playing as Ashley. Her AI has been heavily improved upon from the original game. She will have many mechanics like the ability to distract enemies from Leon, the ability to push enemies away from her, and she will be able to defend herself with small melee weapons. So there have been similar leaks like this in the past, and they all sound really great as they were much needed for Ashley's character in the original. From there, the leaker mentions that Luis Serra's role has been expanded upon in the remake. The game will go further in detail about his backstory of him arriving to the village and slaving away for Sadler. Somewhere in the game, Luis will have a flashback of him and his grandfather. He will specifically help Leon a total of 8 times throughout the game and is planned to survive throughout the entire story. So this is another leak that I would say is much needed. Luis made such an impact in the original game with the little screen time that was given for him, and with this expanded role, he will really be able to shine in the remake. Hopefully Capcom plans on adding him in the Mercenaries game mode as well. Next up, the leaker states that Chief Mendez's house will be heavily expanded upon. Chief Mendez will chase Leon throughout the house, and you will have to solve a variety of puzzles to escape. The house will incorporate many elements from the Spencer Mansion. The next leak states that the RE4 Remake will have a crafting mechanic. This actually kind of makes sense, since we saw some sort of crafting system in Resident Evil 8, where you collected materials and combined these certain materials to make ammunition or health. Moving on, it states that the regenerators will be completely redesigned to look much more terrifying compared to the original. The game will feature multiple versions of these newly designed regenerators, so this sounds really good. I feel like Capcom needs to make sure to capitalize on the regenerators in the remake and make them as terrifying as possible. They were so terrifying in the original, and with the correct use of the RE engine, they could easily make the regenerators in the RE4 Remake the most terrifying Resident Evil enemy of all time. The leaker then states that the merchant will have a lot more lore and backstory in the game. He will also react to Leon similar to how the Duke reacts to Ethan in Resident Evil 8. From there, it states that the castle segment of the game is a lot different from the original. It will take heavy inspiration from the many beta versions of Resident Evil 3.5 and will include many elements from these said betas. Resident Evil 3.5 was honestly so creepy and had a very spooky vibe to it. So if these leaks are indeed true, then I can't wait to see how the elements from the betas are incorporated into the remake. The leaker then states that Salazar's character has been expanded upon and the game will go deeper into the lore behind him. In the remake, Salazar will have a giant pet spider that Leon will face further into the castle. Next up, it states that Albert Wesker will return in the remake, but with a much larger role this time, even having a mini boss fight. So after further thought about this, I feel like Wesker being a boss fight really doesn't make much sense. Wesker sent Ada and Krauser to receive a sample so he wouldn't have to. So with him taking matters into his own hands, maybe Ada betrays him earlier into the game. It will definitely be interesting to see how the story plays out if this leak is indeed true. It then states that the island segment will have a lot less action, and will instead take much more of a horror approach. The island will have less open areas and more lab areas instead. The island will also feature 2 new areas, a huge factory and a huge prison. So me personally, I really didn't mind the island, but I feel like a little less action is much needed for this segment, so this leak sounds pretty good to me. Next, it states that 2 El Gigante have been cut from the game, leaving only 1 in the village. This El Gigante in the village will be located in a cave. From there, it states that Krauser is not cut from the game, and his role is expanded in a very interesting way. He will not be the person to kidnap Ashley in the remake. Furthermore, the knife fight with Leon and Krauser will return in the remake. The leaker then states that the Del Lago boss fight is significantly different, working similar to the Moreau boss fight from Resident Evil Village. And lastly, the leaker mentions that 2 demos are scheduled to release in January of 2023. One will be a village demo, and the other one will be a castle demo. And that was all of the new RE4 Remake leaks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.